Welcome back to the Big Four and More podcast. Mike Patterson and Liam Fox here. It's been a couple of weeks, but we're back. It's been crazy in the sports world as of late, but let's get right into some UFC discussion. Of course, UFC 200, the biggest show in UFC history, is this Saturday, and there has been some controversy surrounding the event with, of course, Jon Jones pulled from the card for a doping violation. Not sure exactly what he was suspended for. There have been no details released yet, but obviously the Jones-Cormier fight, which was supposed to main event UFC 200, is canceled. So instead, the main event will be Tate versus Nunes. The women's fight will take the main event. What is your take on all of this that's been happening with UFC?
It's been a very crazy couple days in the world of UFC leading up to, like you said, this big event. And it's just a really big shame we're going to miss out on this Cormier-Jones fight, and it seems like this might spell the end for Jon Jones, who was one of the biggest UFC stars not too long ago. He's had a suspension before. He's done some jail time before. This was his big comeback, big championship fight at UFC 200. And he's caught screwing up again, and it seems like this was his last straw.
Yeah, I think it's done for Jon Jones because on the press conference there with Dana White, when they had to announce that Jon Jones was suspended, he said that he had faith in Jon Jones and he trusted Jon Jones and he believed that this was his big comeback. And then, of course, it all came to an end, and no one... Well, obviously, Jon Jones was disappointed. Cormier was disappointed. I'll get into that. But, Dana White was just as disappointed as anyone. Not only because he knew that affected his card for his biggest show that he was planning, but, just his relationship with Jon Jones will never be the same now because of this doping violation. So, instead, like I said, the Tate Nunes fight becomes the main event. And Cormier, I don't know if you saw a video. It's trending. There was a video of behind the scenes of Dana White telling Daniel Cormier
Right.
that
In the
hallway that Jon Jones got suspended. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Highly recommend it. And Cormier was just crushed. And it was almost weird for me to see that, maybe originally I was like, oh, wouldn't he be happy that Jon Jones got suspended or something like that? I kind of thought of it like that, but then I realized they want to fight each other, and I should have thought of it like he's getting paid for this fight.
Of course, no one wins in this situation. Yeah. Jon Jones screwed up. He screwed himself out of UFC stardom and probably a UFC career in general. Cormier doesn't get that big headline fight, which I'm sure he's been working for his whole career, really, to this really big fight at UFC 200. He's cheated out of that. UFC's cheated out of, I'm sure, tons of money out of this because this was their headline. This is the fight everyone was looking forward to. And I don't know, like you said about the relationship between Dana White and Jon Jones, and he took a big risk on him, and Jon Jones, he screwed up again. And it's... I don't know. I think the last couple days, especially, you look back a couple months, the whole McGregor situation, and the UFC's been through a lot of turmoil recently, and it'll be really interesting to see how they move forward in terms of scheduling fights and who they choose to be their stars from now on.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think how UFC fighters, they train so hard, studying the other opponent, studying their game, figuring out how to beat them. So at the same time, while they're training and they're depending on themselves to beat the other guy, they're also depending on the other guy to be in the fight. That's actually weird. And
right.
Well, Cormier still gets his fight at UFC 200. Obviously not as big as he would have hoped.
It's a show as much as it's a fight, right? Yeah. It's a spectacle. It's not like another sport where, say, two NHL teams are matching up in the playoffs. It's Philly and Pittsburgh, and Crosby gets hurt, and he can't play in that upcoming series. Philly would probably be pumped about that because now it's easier for them to win. It's not about being easier to win. Cormier is trying to build himself as this big star. he's going to have to beat stars like Jones to make more money and to build his reputation, and now he won't get a chance to do that.
Yeah. Well, he does take on the Spider Silva, and it's big on Silva. No time to even really prepare. He's got this week to prepare, and he's just about to jump in to a fight, and most MMA analysts are picking Cormier to win that fight, and I don't see a reason why Cormier wouldn't win that fight.
Yeah, exactly.
And, of course, another big fight on the card is Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar coming over from the wrestling world. UFC convinced the WWE to let him fight for their big fight, and so now that fight has now been elevated to one of the top of the cards, even some would say above the Cormier Silva fight.
Right.
So that should be interesting to see. It's just they brought in Brock Lesnar to elevate the card to something that is worthy of a UFC 200 fight, and you figured with the John Jones Cormier fight, it was a super card. Now with John Jones out, it's still a good card, but it's the best that they could do with what they had left.
Exactly. Weren't McGregor and Diaz scheduled for 200?
They were scheduled.
So what happened with that whole situation? I didn't really get it. He said he was retiring, and they said, no, I'm not retiring. I'm just dropping out of the card.
So what happened was McGregor was in Ireland training, and the UFC said you have to come to Las Vegas, I believe it was, and like shoot these commercials and do these interviews and stuff. And McGregor was like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm training right now. Like I don't need to do this for you guys. And the UFC was like, yeah, you do. You have to. Like you're contractually like obligated to. And it almost got to the point where McGregor thought he was like bigger than the UFC. Like he could control what he does.
Right.
And the UFC couldn't do anything about it. So then Dana White was like, I'm not taking any of that. I'm pulling you off the UFC 200 fight if you're not going to cooperate. Obviously, Diaz was crushed. McGregor's like, well, what is this? So then he like hints at going to the WWE just to like scare Dana White. He says, I'm retiring from professional fighting. Because like with the UFC, it's not like you're not signed for years. You're just signed for
fight
fights.
To fight, yeah.
Yeah. So like McGregor could do whatever he wants. If he wanted to sign to the WWE, obviously with the WWE, it's like years. It's not per fight.
Right.
He could do that. So that was just to scare Dana White. And then eventually both sides just came together. McGregor pretty much just became level-headed, and they scheduled the fight not for 200 though. I'm not sure.
202.
It's 202?
It's 202, yeah.
So yeah. Obviously that fight I think would have been a bigger fight than Cormier Jones because of the first fight. And I think they wanted to do Jones Cormier for like 199, but Cormier, or it was 198 they were supposed to do it, but Cormier couldn't fight, and so Bones fought another guy, I believe his name was Johnson, and he won that fight.
Right.
So now that they couldn't do McGregor Diaz, they filled him with this fight, and they just saved that fight for UFC in like 202. And now they probably wishing they had McGregor Diaz.
Oh, exactly. So as someone who's more knowledgeable in UFC than I am, who are your picks for these fights? Is Cormier an easy win over?
Yeah, Cormier's
washed up Silva.
Yeah, Cormier's an easy win. I don't really look at like there's Aldo versus Edgar, that's a good fight too.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people would pick Edgar. I'm probably siding with Jose Aldo, and then there's Brown versus Cain Velasquez. A lot of people have Velasquez, but the fight I'm most interested in, that like it's more of a toss-up. I mean, the two first fights of the pay-per-view are kind of toss-ups. Then it'll be Cormier Silva, and that's going to be a wash, I believe. And then it's the Tate versus Nunes. I mean, it's probably going to go to Miesha Tate because Nunes isn't really much of a match for her. I mean, the only one who's really a match for Tate right now is Ronda Rousey. And then the one that's really a toss-up is Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar. And a lot of people and a lot of UFC fans are siding with Mark Hunt, probably because they're like against the WWE and they're like,
It's a sideshow.
Yeah, he's just coming in, he's just for the publicity or whatever. But like, people don't realize like how much of a beast Brock Lesnar is, but they also look at like his record in the UFC, and it's not that good. And he's been criticized because in the UFC you have to earn your way to a title shot.
Right.
But with Brock Lesnar, it was sort of he did what like the WWE does. They go off names and you get a title shot because of your name. And that's what Brock Lesnar got. He got a title shot because of his name, because he was a huge star in the WWE.
This isn't a title fight, though.
This isn't. I'm talking about in the past.
Oh, when he first joined the UFC. Okay.
And so then when he beat Couture, everyone was like, oh, this guy is the real deal. And then he got diverticulitis in his stomach, and that hampered him for a few fights, and that's the reason why he lost some of his fights, or so he claims.
Right.
There have been reports that like he was actually fine during his last fight when he lost to I can't remember his name, Alistar or something.
Okay.
And so a lot of people are like, okay, well, we're looking at Brock Lesnar's past history. He's been beaten. He's not this huge super giant like fighter. And so a lot of people are picking Mark Hunt, but Mark Hunt better be ready, because in interviews, Brock Lesnar says he's ready. He's ready to go. He wouldn't do this if he wasn't ready. So personally, I'm going to be going for Brock Lesnar. I think Mark Hunt's a little just too cocky, and I think he thinks that he has this in the bag too much.
Right.
And you look at a guy like Brock Lesnar, and like Brock Lesnar looks like he can like carry the moon. It's like he's just huge.
Guy's just a gorilla. Like, look at the size of his head and his hands. His hands are massive.
His hands are massive. So I think a lot of people are just saying a wrestler's not going to come in here and get it done. And I think that I'm hoping that Brock Lesnar gets it done. And even for Brock Lesnar, he's doing it for the money. He's not doing it for like
glory.
He's not. If he wins, he wins. If he loses, he loses. He knows that. After this fight, he's going right back to wrestling.
Exactly.
And the outcome of this fight will not affect his stance in wrestling. In wrestling, he's a god.
So did he come to this fight just because the card was so weak that Dana White just threw a bunch of money at him that he couldn't say no to?
It wasn't that the card was weak, but it was like he wanted to make the card better.
Okay.
And so the UFC talked to Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar said, because in the wrestling, he's like a part-timer. He does like the big shows. So obviously, like WrestleMania and stuff like that. So he obviously was available to do this kind of show. And they threw the money at him. Brock Lesnar felt like he was ready to do it. He did it. He knows that no matter what the outcome, it might affect his UFC legacy. But like in wrestling, he'll be the exact same person.
Right, okay.
And the wrestling fans won't be like, oh, you didn't beat Mark Hunt, you're not that tough. Everyone knows that wrestling is scripted, and so in wrestling they prop him up as this huge thing. Now if he wins, they'll just use that as more of a hype thing for wrestling. Like, no matter what happens, I think both sides, like UFC and WWE, they always clash against each other. There's always like people put them up against each other, even though they're like two completely different worlds. But it's just because sometimes their pieces interchange. Like you see Ronda Rousey at wrestling shows, or you see Brock Lesnar or whatever, and like CM Punk is going to be fighting Mickey Gall in a few UFCs. And so you put them up against each other, but they're completely different, because like wrestling fans like wrestling and they know it's not real. And then UFC fans like UFC because they know it's real. And like for me, I like both because I understand what's real and what's not. And for both sides, they win because UFC gets their guy that will draw in the wrestling fans. Because I'm a lot more interested in this UFC fight because Brock Lesnar's in it. And if he wins, then Brock Lesnar takes that with him back to the UFC and or to the WWE, and they just hype him up even more. It's a huge dominant fighter. And if he loses, they just keep him where he's at the top, and he's like this beast. And so no matter what, it helps out both sides. And that's why Dana White and Vince McMahon of the WWE agreed to let Brock Lesnar, because Brock Lesnar couldn't go to the UFC and do this fight if Vince McMahon didn't let him. And Vince McMahon allowed him because he realized it's best for both businesses.
Like you said, like Brock's just doing this for money. But if he loses this fight, does he go back to the WWE and stays there? Or if he wins this fight, does he stick in the UFC and maybe take a shot at another title?
I think it's a one-time thing because
Win or lose.
Because he's under contract with WWE. Now when his contract is done, which I believe is next year, he could go back. But in terms of until his WWE contract's done, he won't fight again. And even he said in interviews, it's just one-time thing, make his money. But you never know what he could. If he does win, he could. He's pretty old. I think he's 38 or something.
He is 38, yeah.
So he's getting up there. So, like,
Mark Hunt's 42, though.
Yeah, Mark Hunt is 42. So, like, it's just we don't know until his contract's done. Just right now, all he's saying is just 1 year, one fight, and then he goes back. And then he's scheduled for, like, a big fight in the WWE, like, in a few weeks from now. At this, like, big event for the WWE. So, like, whether he goes back to UFC, if he loses, I think he's done. He won't go back to UFC. His like legacy there will just be like tarnished pretty much. But like, I mean, he'll still have that victory over Randy. He still had like 4 victories, I believe. But like, if not, I think he just sticks to WWE and just finishes it there.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. But anyways, that's a pretty interesting UFC 200. It's gotten very dramatic, but I'm excited for it. It's this Saturday in Las Vegas at the new T-Mobile Arena. It's sold out.
Las Vegas to be announced names.
Yeah. For hockey, we'll be playing. So yeah, it should be a good fight. All of them should be good fights, and obviously the card did get a little downgraded with the loss of Jon Jones. But I'm sure UFC will make it up somehow and make it a good show.